Hello, everyone. Ben Briggs here for PPC Better, your Nashville based digital marketing and AI sales agency. And today we're going to talk to Kirk Williams of Zato Marketing. And we're going to learn a little bit about his background, kind of what he's doing when it comes to Google Ads, pre kind of the AI revolution, if you will, and kind of how the recent Google and other AI updates have impacted the strategy. So, Kirk, could you introduce yourself? Just give us a little bit of background on where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah. So, hey, I'm Kirk. Zato is a micro agency, I like to call it. There's six of us. We focus on Google Ads, Microsoft Ads. Haven't really branched out into social or other things, just so that we could stay small and kind of know what we're talking about has been my objective. To go deeper on the Google Ads side, and then e-com is a little bit more of our space as well, especially shopping ads, merchant center. I've done that. I've done quite a bit of that over the years. Started it about 15 years ago, and did a lot of writing and speaking on shopping ads. So that's kind of how we've gotten clients and yeah, put out a lot of content around that. So that specifically is my specialty, PMAX and that sort of thing. Yeah, so just live in Montana, got some kids, do the thing. So
Nice, not bad. So what did you do? So what did you do before you got into digital marketing? Did you go the college track, or did you have some kind of a little bit more unique path?
Yeah, so I was actually pursuing my master's of theology in seminary. I was going to be a pastor, so
Okay.
that was the that was the original goal, and then it kind of shifted dramatically. Actually, while I was in seminary, so yeah, that's when I got a job at a little e-com shop. Started learning Google Ads. They basically paid me to learn it, and really started falling in love with it. Got some clients on the side. Eventually started Zato, and yeah, the rest is history. So.
Nice, nice. So what's your general approach been, kind of in the pre AI world? You said you've been in this game for like 15 years, and I don't know if your experience was similar to mine, but I've been hearing about AI for a long time, and all these, oh, you've got to try this and you got to try that, and it seemed like most of it was kind of vaporware, but but in the last, I would say, 18 to 24 months, the AIs have gotten to such a level that you really just can't ignore them.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because in some ways, I think PPCers have been actively using, quotation marks, AI, machine learning, LLM, whatever. There's, yeah, some of those are synonymous, some aren't. But how most people think about AI, PVCers have been using that probably longer than almost anyone else practically, I think, just because a lot of what Google has developed in the space is a lot of what the space is built on. But then they've been incorporating a lot of that stuff, especially like the old, Google Bard and that sort of thing. They've been incorporating that into like bidding algorithms and that for years now. And as you noted, like at varying levels of success and usage and all that. And I think like the last couple of years, the AI explosion is almost this like we'll probably look back on it, and of course it was going to happen just with the nature of how technology how technology develops and grows, especially as it learns on itself. Like as I've talked to some people in the space, is interesting. You just have a lot of infrastructure that has to actually be there for technology as well, right? You have to like store that data. So you have like data warehouses. It requires a ton of electricity. So like you have to like build electrical networks, like new stuff, which is part of what's happening in Silicon Valley. Like there are crazy things on the electrical side, things you wouldn't think of. And then just the fact, like chip design, all that stuff is part of what happens where as the AI gets smarter, it also has like the hardware being developed as well. And I think like it's like those two things have been continuing all at the same time, which is why we've just like seen it significantly grow because it's kind of multiplying on itself, right? But in a lot of ways, I think especially with like bidding algorithms, shopping ads algorithms, A lot of that was like kind of old school AI that we've been utilizing for years. So,
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And when I think about kind of the early iterations of especially the Google AI, I think about the first. It seems to me, and maybe you'll disagree, but it seems to me the first place that they really brought that to us, the Google reps were talking to us about broad match and how broad match was using basically LLMs to do keyword expansion. That was kind of, and they didn't put it that simply. It was, it was a little bit different in the way that they phrased it, um, but do you think that broad match keywords and kind of expanding the query universe that could match to any particular keyword was kind of the first iteration of like LLMs and AIs that we saw in Google paid search?
um, yeah, I don't know if I know as much about the LLM history side of things. But just in terms of if we're like expanding that into like just basic machine learning and that, um, probably I think it would probably be a combination of both like bidding model as well as like broad match expansion, right? Where
Mhm.
Google's kind of doing where they're taking their machine learning and they're investigating it or investing it specifically into some sort of thing, right? And especially on the like so this bidding model to me that's more than just like bidding model. That's like developing the algorithms for how those bidding models run. And so like that's a big part of what they've been doing for years on the back end is like developing machine learning to identify okay, this user, visited these like they did these searches beforehand, they visited these specific sites, this is what they've been interested in, like taking all of that stuff as well as your targets and starting to put that in. That's all machine learning on the back end that gets incorporated into that. And then as you noted for sure, especially on keyword targeting, especially with broad match, we saw that. Obviously, close variants on the others really have expanded out too. That's also to me a similar part of all of that is they're just trying to better target they're trying to take your ad and better target who you're trying to target with who's likely to be your customer, and all of that is done with machine learning. So
Yeah, do you see it mostly with the AI and the machine learning? Do you see the platform more effectively kind of reaching the right customer, or is it better optimized for just serving your ads more broadly?
I think um I think what is happening, especially as AI is used more in PPC, is that it's getting better at identifying the right customer, but it needs a lot of data to do that well. Um, and so, so some of this is just kind of thinking out loud and conjecture, but based on what we've seen, it's almost like Google has gotten worse for smaller accounts and businesses and better for bigger brands. And you'll hear that. Like I talk to people who are just like, "Oh, absolutely, we only turn on broad match and target blah blah blah," or things like that, right?
Mhm.
And I believe them that it works, but then you start to learn, oh, you're playing with a 500,000 a month budget, things like that. And it's kind of like I do believe that the Google engineers are smart. I do believe that what they're building is really good. I think for if you don't have a lot of data, I think that's where it gets tricky. And I'll bemoan the old days a little bit because what it sounds like this is what you're familiar with as well. What you used to be able to do for smaller budgets is just say like, hey, I'm not going to be able to play with the big players. Let's say I'm selling Lego Star Wars kits. I'm not going to be able to play with the big players and just like advertise on the word toys. But what I could advertise on, in the old days is saying, I'm going to take this exact model, the, UCS Millennium Falcon 973492,
Hmm.
like you could do
Yeah.
all that and then say, now I want to show for just this. And there wouldn't be a lot of traffic, but it would be so high in purchase intent that you could make your budget work more. And I think those days are gone for a variety of reasons, which I think hurts SMBs, even if the machine has gotten smarter overall because it needs that data. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What are your yeah? What's your experience with that? And
I mean, I really couldn't have said it much better myself. I think that what we're seeing is that it is much more difficult for businesses who have who have a more limited uh, like service offering set or a limited addressable market to use Google Ads effectively. And what I'm seeing, and it's kind of hard to quantify it. Like I don't have peer reviewed data or anything, but I what I think I'm seeing is that Google has an understanding of what a business is. Like one of our clients is in supply chains and logistics and trucking and these kinds of things. And what we see is that even when we're trying to target containers and drayage, or we're trying to target warehousing, Google still wants to send us trucking leads because Google's just like, you're a trucking company, so here's your trucking leads. And that's a pattern that's repeated with a lot of other clients. Like if we've had a chiropractor who wanted to focus on scoliosis treatments, but he's still just getting regular chiropractor traffic, back pain traffic. Um, so it seems like the LLM models are pretty good at kind of understanding the general subject of what somebody's looking for. But when the advertiser wants to niche down to a specific product or service, it it seems like the algo's really fighting us the whole way.
mhm. Yeah, I think I guess the way I see it is so I've talked to a number of Google engineers, product leads over the years, that sort of thing, and I really think that part of it is that I think this is the nature of like really smart people, tech people is like what they're building for is this ideal solution that will someday happen, and we're not there yet. And so part of the difficulty is, to me, someday I absolutely believe, down the road, let's just say that the models will be sophisticated enough to take a bunch of that feedback and that things that you give, and there will be ways to give user feedback, and we're not trucking and all this stuff, right? And the models will be sophisticated enough, like kind of like humans in that sense, where they will eventually be able to come up with that pretty quickly in terms of, oh, this is the target audience, oh, this, and keep funneling it to what you want. I just think we're in that transitional phase because everything's still so new that it's not there yet. And so I think that's a little where I can agree with the fact that I understand overall, even like what Google and everyone is aiming at. I don't think we're there. So there's also, to me, we have, yeah, especially like us agencies, or if someone's working in house, we kind of have this fiduciary responsibility to our clients to not just build for what could be, but also to actually build right now, like what should be and is happening in the account. Um, and so, like as an example, I mean, everyone, manages actual their ads campaigns. It seems a little bit differently, stuff like that. But like I noted, so like smaller accounts, we still do use a decent amount of like exact match and stay on keywords and that sort of thing, because there still is, like, I understand that broad match does have pretty significant power increasingly these days of like the signals it's using. Broad match uses targeting signals that Google no longer utilizes in phrase and exact match in
Mhm.
that. And so like there is this power there that like is growing, if you will. But like it's just not, it's like still baby power, and so I think that's one of the ways we're just trying to not uh we're trying to not be left behind, but also still try to work with what we have now and kind of like do that dance moving
Yeah,
forward of practically building in ads accounts. Yeah, so sometimes just I see this a lot online. It's almost this like this arguing between like the old school and the new school PPC, and I don't know. I guess I try to use some things out of both of those playbooks, for right now.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you said was that the the data has become more important over time. Like what are the data points that you focus on getting into to Google? It like other than the obvious, clicks and purchases. But are there other like steps in the customer journey or other data points that you're using to try to help the bidding algorithm bring you the right customers?
Mhm. Yeah, and some of what I mean by that is, and then I'll answer your question. Some of that what I mean by that too is like stuff we can't control, like targeting signals that Google is utilizing, like past that person's past search history and stuff like that, that they've noted they use in certain and like I think at one point they've noted they use over like a million bidding signals or something in a search campaign, or whatever the stat is. It's a lot, right? And so in that sense, that's also part of it, is like as this machine is trying to identify, like, okay, here is who we should target. It's like they have so much data, and that's part of why you need typically more spend and time for the machine to gather all this and begin to filter out, okay, these people who have this specific, who have this specific demographic or this specific behavior on site. Over time, Google is kind of like filtering that, and again, that's where I believe, like, with enough data it can. So I think, so first of all, I think there's a lot of data like you can't control, and that's actually part of a little bit of that challenge. Is we need Google's bidding algorithms to get smarter faster. And like I've communicated this to them, like especially with smaller accounts, like I understand that you're telling me you'll probably get there and hit my targets at some point in 6 months. My client doesn't have patience for that. So like what can we do about that, right? So there's that aspect. But then like there is the specific, to your question, the specific data points and that you can that you can control, which are increasingly, I think, like the two most increasingly important things would be getting like conversion stuff absolutely nailed down, and then like some sort of first party data, so customer lists and that sort of thing. Because the reason why those two are so important is because increasingly, as privacy regulations and things hit, first party data is going to be like the one that makes it through. The one that the one that someone doesn't, drop off somehow at some point from privacy regulations, because you own that data as a first party. And so that, I think, is increasingly, my understanding is Google's increasingly building its signals as well around that. So that's also part of it. It's more than you just like getting a list in there and telling Google, this is who I like. You're like giving Google a foundation of like, this is your audience. And they are incorporating that more, is my understanding, building signals based on that. So that's kind of one of those reasons why, like, yes, when Google talks about first party data, like it is important. But then even just like conversion data, it feels like this is the conversation, we've had ever since I started this. I mean, for probably 15 years, everyone's like, "Hey, conversion data is really important." And like it's just amazing that it still is tricky, and it still gets set up incorrectly, and it still can be wrong, and it still needs to be audited. And so that's the other thing, is just actually making sure that the signals you're telling Google that you care about, like, make sure that those are accurate according to, they're the signals you actually care about, that you want Google to optimize for, and then like make sure they're recording the data correctly. So
Sure, sure. So there were kind of two kinds of data that you spoke to there: the first party data and the conversion data. I know there might be some overlap in that Venn diagram, but just for people who who maybe aren't as big of data nerds as we are, maybe could you tell us a couple examples of what first party data is?
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'll admit, like, I'm one of those, I know enough. I don't know if I qualify to be a data geek. I don't qualify, like, if people start diving into like the analytics stuff and all that, and they'll
Sure.
lose me pretty quick.
So
But
like the
but
technical definitions, like
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
you're not diagnosing IP addresses and
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, basically, first party data is data that you have as your business, acquired, especially like through Google. So, like email addresses, phone numbers, that sort of thing. And also there are appropriate ways to gather that information, by the way. So again, like make sure that you're gathering that in legal and appropriate ways and that sort of thing, as in, i.e., you're asking or they're allowing you to have that for the purpose of marketing. But then you can utilize that by giving those signals back into Google, so that Google can tie a sale to a customer. And another term within Google Ads would be enhanced conversions, of turning that on. So Google's able to tie a sale to that first party data, which also helps in building their conversion models too, by the way, because a big part of machine learning and is modeling, which is basically like you don't have all of the possible information, and so you take, I mean, this is super oversimplified, and probably people are listening who know this way better than I. But okay, we have like 70% of the information here. So with that, and all of everything we know, we'll like guesstimate what the rest of the 30% is, right? That's your basic modeling. So they also increasingly will use your first party data for that, as well as most likely, they anticipate losing more and more of third party data, which would be data that someone else owns that you're utilizing. Yeah. So I think I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully that helps. Again, we are in a transitional period right now, even like with data as well, which also is what makes this stuff so interesting and unique, is because so much is changing so rapidly, um that like it's almost, so privacy and tech are or AI are for sure intertwined, and then they're kind of not. They're almost like these two separate things, but then they're totally intertwined, and they're kind of like growing together. And that is also part of it right now, is like we're all doing our best to hang on, follow the rules as best we know them, and as they're being created, while still making money. So
Yeah, yeah. And so you mentioned privacy there, and privacy definitely has an impact on tracking. Are you using GA4 for most of your accounts, or is that kind of is that tool kind of falling by the wayside for you?
yes to both of those. Yeah, I mean we always install it. We always install it. We just don't use it as much as we used to, honestly. I mean, I still like to get an idea. Frankly, what we use more and more are like our internal client reporting, and then our channel reporting, like ads and that. So a client, so let's say we have an ecom client and they're using like triple whale, like attribution software, and we probably have GA4 set up as well, and then they have their own internal database as well. And one of the things I really like one of my favorite reports increasingly is just this like super simplistic spreadsheet of basically your overall revenue, the different channels that they are advertising on, with spend and revenue broken out and like mapped weekly over time, because you can really start to see some trends and that sort of thing with something like that. To gather your own takes on it. But I like seeing that. I used to spend a ton of time in analytics.
Mhm.
I'm just not in there much anymore. And from what I understand, my clients, they aren't either. So
Have you seen any impact that you think might be attributable to privacy tools on the quality, or like the percent that actually gets attributed to a channel when you look at traffic in GA4?
I don't really watch that.
Yeah.
Um, I know iOS 14.5, that was a huge conversation when that hit a few years back, and that was a big deal. Yeah, I don't really know, and a lot of that is because as we're tracking things and setting things up, it's all first party cookied with Google Ads and the Google tag anyways. So I don't really know if that impacts us too much anyways. So yeah, I guess I haven't really noticed that yet as a huge issue. But are you seeing something different in yours, or?
I mean, I feel like that, and again, I don't have super robust data, but it seems to me like a lot of the data is being hidden. Like if
Mm,
I look at the um, if I look at metrics like clicks attributed in the Google Ads platform versus clicks that get attributed to Google
mm,
Ads in
mhm,
GA4, and I look at a client who's had that tracking set up for a long time, or maybe I even go back to
mhm,
the Universal, the UA days, like the Google Universal Analytics, the pre GA4. I it seems to me like the trend is that the data was closer like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 3 years
agreed.
ago than it is now. It seems like there's bigger deltas, and and my favorite part is that it's not always under, it's not always over. It could be either one. If you
Mhm,
look at three different
mhm,
accounts, you could have one account who's saying where Google says you got more traffic, where Google Ads says you got more traffic, another account where it's about the same, and then another account where GA4 says you got more traffic. So
mhm,
it's I'm attributing a lot of that to privacy tools, but that's kind of
mm.
just reading the tea leaves. So
That's yeah, that is true, and it's funny now that you say, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that is pretty common in ours," and I think some of it is isn't there some stuff with, like, misattributed sources and that sort of issues that they've had in GA4 as well and all that, and I've just kinda again, to the point where, like, we just don't really use GA4 enough to and maybe this is something I should rethink, but, like, that's where we just tend to be in our other tools, and I don't know. I hate GA4,
yeah, I don't like it either. And the
but that's a
data
good call out, yeah.
accuracy of it is has been a real challenge when when you go in and try to set everything up correctly and it's still
Mhm,
all over the place.
mhm.
But going back to ecom and kind of the AI targeting issues, do you see any similarities between how Google is choosing kind of queries to serve your e-commerce, your product listing ads against, and what we see from broad match and search campaigns?
Um, okay, let me make sure I understand. I might need you to say that again. Are
Well,
you
well,
saying
kind of.
similarity? Yeah,
Let me
go ahead.
simplify it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
um, so what's your kind of overall like how is Google using products like the product page, the Google Merchant Center product data
Mm.
to match
Oh,
to
gotcha.
queries for shopping campaigns, or how are they how are they picking audiences on the PMAX side for those products?
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So, for listeners, difference between shopping and search at a simple level would be searches specifically you can pick keywords, at least at this point.
Yeah,
um
for now.
and yeah, for now. And shopping is yeah, feed based. And so basically that's where your shopping feed, you'll probably hear people talk about feed optimization and that where the idea is you need to get your feed attributes to signal to Google, here's what my product is about. So then Google is able to match that up with their queries, right? And so a lot of that is served, or a lot of that is dependent on like your title being correct, your description. Some of the other product attributes are pretty important. One and then PMAX is its own ball game because you reference audiences. Well, again, people don't always realize audiences in PMAX are signals. They're not audiences. They're not targeting the metrics or methods, right? So that's its own level of tricky. Is PMAX is kind of like using whatever their system is to identify the user and all the channels that they're on YouTube and that, as well as your feed, finding that individual. PMAX is its own discussion too. Yeah, so that's kind of how the shopping feed and Google's system works, where if someone, let's just say at the core level, where someone searches for something, Google's taking the information from your shopping feed, matching it with that query, as well as things like your bid and that sort of thing. And so if you are interested in optimizing, trying to be found on more searches, maybe you can test putting different keywords or terms that you are interested in showing up for, you can test putting those in titles. One of the things, probably the thing I'm most excited about what was announced at Google Marketing Live last week, GML, was almost like I've almost heard no one else talk about this, and it's like they're gonna show A/B testing in Merchant Center for product attributes, which they've never done before, and which is like, first of all, is like a super no brainer. This should have been done years ago. But that means you can actually like create title tests or images. That's a big one for me. Like you can actually like try a new image in your shopping feed and see if it performed better or not. In the past, you were just kind of like hoping and praying and seeing if you saw a change in impression share or something like that. So, anyways, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
So
hopefully
it's
gives more context around that. And
so when you say product attributes, it sounds like you're talking about description, image, headline. Like are there other attributes that you can use in these A/B tests?
so I asked them, so I was at GML last week and I asked them what attributes are included, and like they said all of them. So I
All
don't know. Yeah. So in
well,
terms
I'm
of
not going to
being
split
able to
test
A B
like
test.
I'm not going to split test SKU number. Like
Yeah. Well, and again, like that's where it's like, okay, all mean like the top, like the required ones or whatever. So we'll see when it actually rolls out. The ones I'm excited about would be things like title description image would probably be the most. Yeah. So
sure. And is this a planned release or is this like a beta that some of your clients have access to at this point? Or
I've not seen it anywhere.
yeah.
So sometimes what Google does at GML is they say, "Here's something that's coming," and it'll be like 2 years later, and
Yeah,
you're
well,
like, "Is
or
it?
they'll say
Is
it's
this
coming
coming?"
out. It's totally
Yeah,
totally going to be here in September, and then like two
yeah,
Septembers later, you're like, "Hey guys, what's going on here?"
yeah. Remember that thing you announced? They're like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah." So
that's why I call it
I'm
kind
not
of call it
sure.
vaporware, you know.
Yeah, exactly,
But yeah,
exactly.
so we'll see
So
how that goes. But but kind of more to strategy and kind of what's happening right now. It's like what are some of the biggest mistakes when you're maybe onboarding new clients or auditing new accounts? What are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing across e-com advertisers at this point?
yeah, I would say conversion tracking is still a huge problem. There's just always, and it's always like broken in a different way, which is interesting too. Like sometimes so the conversion page in Google can be a little confusing, especially if you don't really know what's going on, right? You have like primary things and secondary things and all this stuff, account level conversions and campaign level conversions and all that, right? And so some of that is just doing some basic audits just to be like, hey, are you actually targeting the thing you want to target? And sometimes they'll have like two revenue sources, both set on primary and being tracked in account level or things like that, right? So it's basically duplicating conversions.
Sure.
So that's one of them. And another one would be the new customer value. We see people, so I want to be careful. This isn't necessarily a mistake, but this is one of those people need to fully understand the ramifications. So, you can basically you can define who a new customer is to Google. And this I have complained to them a number of times about this. The way that they try to calculate it is by suggesting to calculate your LTV and then like add that amount in. So you're telling Google, here's what a new customer is worth to my business. And the problem is this comes through in your conversion value column and is optimized. And so what people don't always realize is they're like, okay, well, I sell $20 product, but and that's the other thing is like I don't think anyone actually puts an accurate number in there. Some of that is tricky in itself. Like LTV is a little tricky if you're also not aware of the potential future spend you're gonna. So it's kind of like okay, LTV, but like in some ways it's like what is what's the lifetime? That's lifetime value. For anyone listening, like it's almost like what's the lifetime margin? That's almost more important, right?
Sure.
Like the lifetime profit, right? Anyways, so there's issues with that already. People don't realize. So sometimes they'll be like, I don't know, let's put, it's a $20 product. Let's put $130 in there. And what they don't realize is that's literally changing their conversion value. That can be, if you have that set account level goals and it's, running on a campaign and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just a matter of like walking them through that, making sure they're aware of that, making sure that's what they want. Um, yeah. So a lot of times if we're aiming at new customers, we'll actually create a separate PMAX new customer campaign and set like a 0.1 cent conversion, just so we're kind of telling Google, just go after new customers, which isn't really technically how PMAX is supposed to work, but that is kind of how we're hacking it, hopefully. I'd much rather have them allow us to set different margin, like ROAS targets for new or returning customers, since that's how our clients think. So that's another one that we often call out. Sometimes I've seen, so we'll see either oversimplified or undersimplified or overly complex accounts. To me, that can go, two ways. You might have someone with 300,000 products in one PMAX campaign, with a $200 a day budget. And you're kind of like, I don't.
Well, it'd be plenty of data. The platform could totally optimize.
Exactly. And what
It's got
happens?
like what, 100th of a cent per product a
Yeah.
day. It's
Yeah. And as you know, like what happens, because PMAX runs after, PMAX is wired to run after the easiest sales.
yep.
And I just don't think, I don't necessarily like, that doesn't necessarily bug me. I just think it's important to know that. Like, right? Um, if they made PMAX that way, fair. So it's gonna run after brand, it's gonna run after remarketing, stuff like that. There's almost some level I'm like, okay, cool. Like let's work that into our strategy within that, right? It's when people try to make it do all this other stuff that you start to get in trouble. But yeah, in that instance, it's kind of like, okay, so you're showing on like the 20 products it thinks it can sell and all of those others, right? So that's oversimplified account. Or sometimes we're seeing more and more of these like unnecessarily complex accounts as well. So it's like on the other side, like someone has, 200 products and they have like, 40 PMAX campaigns.
40
Yeah,
VMAX campaigns you actually see?
that's an exaggeration. We've seen where, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's kind of like you're spending 20,000 a month and you have like 25 PMAX campaigns. Like why? So that's one of them. Is just like, hey, start pausing things. You're now, you actually are not giving Google enough information, right? You're over segmented. So yeah, those are probably some of the other. I mean, there's probably other things too, but maybe those are the most common.
Sure.
Yeah.
So on the PMAX side, there's obviously bad reasons to create multiple different PMAX campaigns. Like I don't really have a reason, or I thought maybe it would work better. Like randomly, if I launch, if PMAX campaigns that you launch on Tuesday are much better than campaigns you launch on other days. Um,
Yep.
but like, are there good reasons to have more than one PMAX campaign, and if there are, what would those smell like?
Yeah. So okay. So let me start with kind of the big picture. And that is, I don't think that there is one specific way to do PMAX. So I'll just reveal that. Some people have like a PMAX, and I don't know you super well, so sorry if this is if this is you. Hopefully I'm not offending you. I don't, someone who says I have a specific roadmap and this is what I do in PMAX in every single account. I don't think that's how I've seen PMAX work. Um, and so that's part of where I start from, is like there are basic principles about all this stuff that we know, and then there are ways that we test it, and there are likely ways to start, but also like we'll test things. Um, and so yeah, I guess it's funny. I was so focused on the philosophy thing that I actually forgot like what the very specific question was. What was the specific question
Well,
again?
so should most advertisers just have one PMAX
Oh yeah, yeah,
campaign?
yeah.
Or
That's
are
right.
there good reasons to have multiple PMAX campaigns? Because we agree that just randomly creating 20 PMAX campaigns
Yeah.
is a bad idea. But like what would like is there ever reason to have more than one PMAX campaign for your brand?
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. No, so that's kind of the big place I'm starting. And then the next place I'll go with PMax is again, what did Google build this for? So um the problem to me with too many PMax campaigns and over segmenting is you're kind of starting to trip up like the way that it's designed. And in some ways, PMax does work better when you give it more data, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So there is so that's part of the whole over segmentation is it's like you're trying so hard to tell Google, here's where I want you to go. And that's also in some ways I think it's actually getting in the way of how Google designed it with its algorithms to like give us as much data and then we'll make the decision. So where I typically look with that is um if you really want to have a lot of manual control on things, you really instead of like trying to do 25 PMax, like, man, why don't you really focus more on like standard shopping, query filtering, strategy, multiple search campaigns, display, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
right? Oftentimes we'll have both those and PMax, but so that's another level then on just how we think about that would be are we trying to force PMax into this overly segmented box that's not just meant to do? So then kind of as we're thinking through all that, then we're also looking at like how much budget is there, how many products are there, what are like who are the target audiences for this client, and is there a significant difference in maybe some audiences versus others? And that's how we then start to think through, okay, if there's enough of a distinction in, let's say, audiences and or products, or there's just a ton of products, like I said before, I have seen that. I think it was like 150,000 products in one PMax campaign, and only like 60 products were even getting sales, right? So like again, to the level of, at some point, if you have that budget, then like, yeah, you should be thinking of segmenting this out so that Google has enough budget to like do the products you've given it properly. And we will try to think through in that case, are there ways that we could organize that? I'm trying to think of an example without necessarily giving away client information, but we might have, let's say, like some sort of, let's say we're serving like home service type contractors, things like that. Oh, that might be a good one. Like, let's say like tools, um, where you have almost this like commercial B2B audience, like contractors, and then you also have like home, like
Yeah, homeowners.
DIYers, yeah,
Mhm.
homeowners, yeah. And so to me, that's a really great instance of like try as much as possible to like break those into different campaigns, because then you can have your assets, your audiences. You're like, there's probably going to be a lot of differences. Probably AOV is going to be different. I mean, a commercial person's probably going to be buying more than a homeowner, all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
That's an example of where, yeah, we probably would break those into multiple campaigns if we have enough budget and and products and that, just because there's such a significant difference. We kind of are wanting to generally guide Google at the right place. um but we might, but we're not gonna, very rarely are we going to then pull all of the individual campaigns for like, very individual tool sets or things like that. Yeah. So does that
Gotcha. Yeah,
that help?
so it sounds like what you're saying is that if you've got multiple different audience segments who don't share a lot of attributes, then
Hmm.
it might make sense to have two different or if there's three different audiences, then three different PMAX campaigns, whatever that is. So, and the example you gave was if you've got contractors, like maybe they're tools, if you're a Home Depot or somebody like that, maybe there are tools that are more geared specifically toward contractors. So those would be the products that would be included in the contractor campaign. And then maybe you've got more of a focus on the budget items in your homeowner campaign or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. Also, location is a different one. Just because location's still at a campaign level. They did change that in the new AI Max for search campaigns. I don't know if you saw that, but apparently, like, location is going to be at an ad group level, which is
It's my
super interesting.
understanding was that was more of a that was more it's more of a reporting thing. It's more of like an observation, but I could be wrong about that.
Hmm.
Like the
I
way
could
it
be
was
wrong either. I've not
presented,
run them.
that I saw was that the like you were targeting the US, but then you're finding out how you're performing in San
Hmm.
Francisco and Dallas or whatever. Um, but I
Okay.
could be wrong about that. And also, I think that is that a feature that's already been rolled out, or is that one of the another one of the coming soons?
I think AI Max is in open beta, I think.
Okay,
So it should be accessible. So I think if someone's like listening, they're like, yeah, I want to test that. I think you can contact your Google rep and get access to it, or you could ask anyways. Yeah.
sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
So,
uh, s-
anyways, yeah.
so as far as AI, I mean, we can tell that a lot of search is moving into AI. I don't know if you've seen the SEO community has been up in arms for at least 18 months about the AI previews. And now I think you can actually go. I haven't tried the AI powered Google search myself yet, but I use ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm using those like every single day. And we
Same.
did see in April of this year was the first year for it was the first month in 22 years when Google searches actually went down overall. Um, so as far as do you do anything on the organic side, or are you purely a paid guy? Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Purely paid. Yeah.
so what do you think is like do you see paid inclusion in the LLMs coming in the near future? Like do you think that that will be an opportunity for existing PPCers?
Yes, and some of that I think they're starting to announce that, right? I think AI overviews and ads in Google are basically rolling out already. So that'll be interesting. And I think you can only surprise to all, I think it's only through PMax and AI Max for search that you can appear in AI overviews. So, and I just saw a tweet actually by Ginny Marvin, the ads liaison for Google this morning, where she noted that, oh gosh, I don't remember what it was she was specifically saying. Someone was asking like, can you appear in an AI overview and like below it or something? And I don't remember what it was, so I won't even try to note what she was saying. All that to say, they're already trying to think through like, okay, yeah, what does that look like? Like, what does it look like? What do AI overviews and the relationship to the rest of the SERP look like? I think Google's figuring all that stuff out too. I think there's a ton. So I had so last week at GML, I met with some other PPCers. We met with product leads. It was like closed door meetings, super NDA. So there's also stuff I can't really, talk about. But like we talked a lot about the AI type stuff, and I can just note like this is very front of mind for Googlers as they're just trying to think through how are not just like how do we want search to change, because I think sometimes people can fairly and unfairly say that about Google, kind of like they're always trying to change search. Some of it is like reacting to a change in user behavior too, right? But then also there's just different ways that people are utilizing LLMs in a conversational way that just makes a lot of basic search stuff in terms of metrics and all this stuff just tricky or non-existent, or like how do you think about that, right? So here's where I'll even say a little bit of a defense of Google. Like I think there's some level where this is super untested waters for everyone and everyone's just kind of like trying to figure this out. So ads and AI overviews are going to be interesting. I've kind of been wondering, I've wondered this aloud for a few weeks now on social media, and that which is the nature of an AI overview a lot of times is to get your answer answered. So that does not require a click, and a click, that's a big part of SEO is they want the click, but even the credit, right? They're frustrated about that. Understandably so, as a person who puts content out there. But on the ad side, there's no way a $2 trillion company is gonna like happily lose its click-based revenue from ads not getting clicked in all of these zero-click AI searches overviews, right? I would not be surprised if they start rethinking even like, and this is just me conjecturing. This is not any conversation whatever with Google. This is purely me conjecturing, but are they going to start needing to kind of think through more of like an impression based bidding model or something like that on these, just because like they're just going to start having less clicks to our websites, um there's so many, and again, I think it's just one of those, like, so many things are at their core changing, but they haven't really changed. Um, but I don't know. There's just a lot to think through. So,
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. I know they had the announcement with Chat GPT and Shopify recently. So as an e-commerce, like, did you hear about that? And is there anything like, do you have any, like, are you using it? Do you have any early results?
I'm not using it, don't have any early results, yeah. So, not remotely surprised. I know Sam Altman and OpenAI had been like, "No, I hate ads." It's like, "Oh, come on, buddy." Like, of course you're gonna put ads up, kinda like Google in the old days. It's kinda like, we're not
Sure.
idiots. So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there'll definitely be
uh,
something about that. I haven't seen the Shopify results in the Chat GPT or anything like that yet, but it would but I was super interested when I heard about it. I was like,
hmm,
wow, this could be really cool. Um,
yeah.
but let's see.
Wow, yeah, huh.
So Google Marketing Live, I know we've talked about that quite a bit. Based on everything that you saw there, do you have any predictions about like what we're gonna see in 2025?
Um, I don't think so. Well, okay, let me maybe say I was happy with the fact that for the most part, no massive major platform changes were announced. And we've had a lot of platform changes. We've had a lot of, whatever. Okay, AI Max for search was announced, and that is a big deal. But I mean, but it's not like they announced that and they're like, okay, so now we're replacing keywords yet, that sort of thing. So I think in some ways, I'm actually really happy with. It sounds like we have a little bit of a year of stability to at least continue learning how we're going to do all this without having to totally change up the nature of our advertising. That is the thing that annoys me the most about all these, like, okay, now it's smart shopping, okay, now smart shopping's PMAX, that sort of thing. Is you just don't get any time to even process out how you should think about these changes, stuff like that. It's just upon you, right? So my hope, and maybe this is some good advice for people listening, would be, if this year doesn't involve like any massively core account changes that you're forced to do, it might be a really good time to be doing a lot of learning and thinking about how this will impact everything, because it will, as well as testing, things like AI Max Research, test it out, even if you don't like the idea of it or whatever. And this might be a really good year for that. Um, yeah, just because it is far from unlikely that the next few years may involve massively significant change. So, yeah, maybe this is a good education year. So,
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so where can people find you? What kind of clients should get in touch? Or do you have like books or educational stuff that you're doing, how should people find you if they want to learn more?
sure. Yeah. Zatomarketing.com is my agency website. We do work with ecom and lead gen clients. And we also have a small budget program as well. So, in some ways, I just suggest, hey, head over there, look us up. If you know you like what you see, throw us a contact form, and we can work with you to see if we're a good fit. I've written a couple of books, Ponderings of a PPC Professional. And that just has a lot, in some ways, like what we've talked about in various ways of just trying to think through stuff, like how will this impact things. I think that people are better. I think people make better tactical technical choices within the UI if they have a good understanding of what's driving things, right? So that's why I do think things like philosophy and that matters. So that's why I wrote that. Just try to make it an enjoyable read. And then also I have a book called Stop the Scale: Building the Digital Agency You Actually Like. Just kind of pondering, rethinking. I did a TEDx talk on that as well, same title. Just kind of rethinking business success. What does that look like? I don't think it's just being as much revenue as you possibly can. And then I have a Merchant Center Mastery YouTube channel I'm trying to build, trying to really do a lot with just like going deep into Google Merchant Center. Here's things I've learned. Here's tips on, I'm trying to work through all the attributes. Here's tips for optimizing, things like that. and then I'm PPC Kirk pretty much everywhere else. So
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks a lot for joining. It was really nice to meet you via Zoom, and thanks for sharing all the info about GML Live and Google Ads generally. And to everybody watching, thanks for taking the time to check this out. Give us a like and subscribe, and follow the channel for more info like this.